Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining this session. I'm Cecilia Irazoqui from Uruguay. I'm a learning consultant. And today's session is about diversity in the EFL classroom. What do we talk about when we talk about diversity? I would like to share the paradigm from which I invite you to look at diversity. Then I'm going to talk about what can we do about diversity in the classroom? What opportunities and what limitations do we have? And then how can we plan for diversity in the classroom? Some practical ideas and suggestions to plan effectively in a diverse classroom. So to start with, what do we talk about when we talk about diversity? First of all, I would like you to think. I will give you 5 seconds to think about the answer to this question. How do you feel about diversity in the EFL classroom? In 2 words. How do you feel? Now, probably you all have different perceptions about diversity, and I would like you to look at your words, the words you chose, look at them and think. If you look at those words, do you consider diversity as a norm or as an exception? Do you consider it a problem or an opportunity? To be honest, as adults at work and as teachers, our prior knowledge, our prior experience, both personal and professional, have an impact on our beliefs. They shape our beliefs about diversity, and that in turn has an impact on our actions about diversity. So it's very important to be aware of this in order to know how we react and how we work with diversity in the classroom. First of all, we need to know our beliefs to shape our actions. So from an inclusive approach, diversity is the norm, and diversity is an opportunity for growth and enrichment. Okay, is not seen as a problem but as a strength, and it means a shift in the way we look at the problem. These 3 pictures present a problem. The problem is not all the members of the audience can see the match, right? And depending on where you think the problem is the way you're going to solve it. In the first 2 pictures, the problem is believed to be in the audience, the members of the audience. So the solution addresses the height of the members of the audience. In the third picture, on the other side, the problem is in the interaction between the members of the audience, their characteristics, and the context. So in this case, there are 2 members which have no problem at all, but there's a third member whose height is so short that when that person interacts with a fence, a wooden fence, cannot see the match. So the problem is solved by removing that barrier in the context. So this is the essential concept when we talk about inclusion, okay? That the problems and the difficulties in the learning process arise in the interaction between the learner and the context, and we need to remove those barriers or develop different scaffolding strategies or support strategies whenever we cannot remove the barrier that is hindering the learning process. So, what can we do about diversity in the classroom? And here I like the concept of Stephen Covey, who shares the concept of 3 circles. He says there are 3 circles: the circle of concern, the circle of influence, and the circle of control. The circle of concern includes everything that we cannot control, right? And we cannot have an influence on. It's like given to us that way, right? In this case, it would be the wider context, the language, the native language of the student, the organization where we work and its demands and characteristics. Then we have the circle of influence, which involves everything that we can have an influence on, but we cannot control the results or the output, the outcome, okay? In our context, it would mean the students and their learning process. We can have an influence on that, but we cannot control the outcome. And the circle of control is everything we can have an input and an influence on, and we can also control the output. And the only thing we can control is ourselves and our teaching, right? So if we worry about things that are within the circle of concerns, we are wasting our time because we cannot change those things. Those things can be either the mother tongue of the students, the reason why they start learning English, their age, the national and international examinations characteristics, the time they spend with us learning English, and many other things that you might think of, right? We cannot change that, so we need to take them as facts and develop creative strategies to work with that. The circle of influence, that includes the social, emotional, and cognitive skills and processes of the students within the social aspects, how they interact, what are their expectations, their social skills. From an emotional point of view, what are their interests, their motivation, their self-esteem and self-concept, their personality and character, and within their cognitive skills, how is their attention span, their memory, their language, their reasoning, flexibility, processing speed, executive functions and organizational skills. All those are processes that we can have an influence on, although we cannot control the outcome. And finally, our circle of control, which is our own selves, right? Our knowledge and skills as teachers, our words and actions in the classroom, our thoughts and expectations, and our attitudes. And it might sound as this is not much, but let's be positive. Now I will ask you to think of your best teacher, your most memorable teacher, and why you consider that person your best teacher. 5 seconds to think about 2 characteristics that make that teacher the best you've had and the most memorable one. Now, look at your words. What type of skills or attributes did you highlight in that person, in that teacher, to consider that teacher your best teacher? I don't know if you've heard, but there's something called the Pygmalion effect, which is really powerful. And it talks about the expectations, the power of expectations. The Pygmalion effect says that the expectations we have on someone else has an influence and an impact on the performance of that other person, right? So if a teacher considers a student to be really able and capable, that student is going to perform much better. There's a research that was carried out where there were 2 groups, low achievers and high achievers. They were presented to 2 different teachers, but the low achievers were presented to the teacher as high achievers and the high achievers were presented as low achievers. By the end of the research period, both groups were evaluated again, and the results were the other way around. The ones that started as low achievers obtained better results than the ones that started as high achievers. And the element or the factor that changed that was the expectation of the teachers. The teacher that was told that he was receiving a group of low achievers didn't expect much from the students, so they didn't improve that much. And the other way around, the opposite happened with the other group. So we do have something really powerful in our hands as teachers, which is our expectations and motivation to students. Then, how can we plan for diversity in the classroom? There are 3 key elements that most authors recognize. The first one is having a learning support team. Collaborative work. This is not something easy, and it involves the teamwork in a way, right? Between teachers, but also between teachers and specialists, and parents and students. And then thoughtful planning, because one size fits all is not something that is useful anymore. So, the planning process. How do we go about it? First of all, we need to get to know our students, right? And we need to devote time to get to know them. Know their social skills, their cognitive skills, their emotional aspects. Then we need to have clear learning objectives. What is negotiable and what is non-negotiable? What things they need to learn and what things we can change and vary. Step 3, we need to identify potential barriers. Knowing our students and knowing our learning objectives, what are the potential barriers we might find when we start working on that topic or objective. And finally, taking all those 3 steps into account, plan for diversity. Getting to know your students. It's really important to take some time to get to know, for example, their social skills and preferences. Do they like to work in pairs, in groups, individually? Do they like to collaborate or to compete? Do they like to debate, to dramatize? What type of activities and social interactions do they like, and engage them? Interests, what do they like? Are they into sports, art, music, games. What type of games do they like? What topics are they into? And finally, their learning profile, right? How autonomous they are, their pace, their talents, their learning challenges, if there are any learning difficulties, and their learning style. Once we know our students, we need to know our curriculum and have a clear view of our objective for each lesson. Are we going to focus on subject areas in English or language itself? If we focus on subject areas, are we going to focus on the concepts or the vocabulary in English for those concepts? Based on that, what do we expect from students? Do we expect them to understand the concept or to use it or to transfer that concept to a different context? For example, if the non-negotiable is understanding the concept, then to make sure they understand the concept, I can evaluate them through different ways of expression, because my non-negotiable is the understanding and not the expressing of that concept. Language. Are we going to focus on the use of the language or the form and content of the language? And if it's the use of the language, which skill are we going to focus on? Is it reading, writing, listening, speaking, or the cultural use of the language? If we focus on form and content, are we going to focus on pronunciation, spelling, grammar, vocabulary? There are many different aspects, and we need to have a clear view of what is our non-negotiable objective so that we can use the rest as variables to play around. Then, identify potential barriers. And these can be plenty. They can be physical barriers, cognitive barriers, social barriers, motivational barriers, organizational resources, barriers related to resources of the organization. There can be many. We need to identify them so that we can plan taking them into account. And finally, planning for diversity. And when we talk about that, usually teachers feel overwhelmed because they feel they need to be like Mary Poppins with her bag full of ideas, activities, and different options to cater for everyone in the classroom. But is it possible to plan once and for all? Not one size fits all, but once and for every student. There's one framework that suggests some ideas to be able to do that, to plan once and for all, which is the universal design for learning. I imagine you have heard about it a lot of times, but it takes into account three different aspects: the representation, how we represent the information for students, how they express it, how students express their knowledge and the actions we expect from students, and how we're going to engage them, right? Taking these three things into account and presenting different options for each one of these to students helps to cater for diversity. So let's look at some concrete strategies. When we talk about representation and expression and action, when we present the information to students or the content, and when we ask them to express it. One very useful strategy is segmentation. Segmenting activities, segmenting tasks helps different types of students. It helps students with attention challenges who find it difficult to concentrate. When they have segmented activities, they can start and finish them, and they have a sense of achievement and fulfillment. Also, students who don't like that activity very much or the topic, who find it difficult to get engaged, when they address smaller chunks of activities, they have that sense of fulfillment, and that benefits everyone. Learning aids, such as having high frequency words, the times tables, concrete material, anything that you can think of that might help students to incorporate certain concepts or skills is useful to have there, and appealing to their autonomy, right? First, we need to teach them how to use them, and then we can expect them to go and get those aids to use them when they feel necessary. And then visual, auditory, and kinesthetic strategies, having different colors, pictures, sounds, speaking and also writing. Kinesthetic strategies, for example, There was a teacher who had to teach punctuation marks. That was the non-negotiable. And he thought it might be a boring topic for students, so he developed a strategy to teach it through Kung Fu punctuation, he called it. So each punctuation mark was associated to a movement and a sound coming from Kung Fu, and that made it very engaging for students and memorable. So thinking out of the box and think of different strategies to make content memorable and engage students is really useful, and using also verbal and non-verbal strategies. Then when we talk about engagement, to engage students, anticipation is a very useful strategy. The daily agenda, with the different topics, pre-reading, pre-writing, pre-speaking, pre-activities are also very important. Warm-up activities to anticipate contents, or even presenting texts beforehand and then using them on a different day. Grouping students, varying the way we group students individually, in pairs, in groups, for debate, for collaboration activities, is also a tool to engage them. Gamification, using formats and content of games that they know and they like to work on something different. For example, if they like Instagram and they have to learn about a certain historical character, they can create an Instagram account for that character, and that implies a lot of research about the character, but it's more engaging for them. And then feedback. Feedback is crucial, giving feedback to students about things they are doing well and things they need to improve. Both should always be there, the hamburger or the switch strategy, positive, negative, positive. It is not easy. It requires, from the point of view of the teacher, it requires empathy, creativity, flexibility, collaboration, and of course, knowledge. But although there's no recipe for this, the good news is there are a bunch of tools and ingredients waiting to be combined to suit the diners. And this unique combination can only be created by a knowledgeable and motivated chef. And that chef is you. So the role of the teacher cannot be substituted. The teacher as facilitator to the one who combines the different tools and strategies is crucial, because there are no recipes, there are no sequences of steps that we can follow and will work for every group. Each group is different, and the expert there that can mix the different ingredients and use the different tools is the teacher. So you have a really important role there, and your expectations towards students is crucial and can make the difference. Thank you very much. I hope you have found this talk useful, and I'm open to your questions. Thank you very much.